Good evening and welcome back, poetry lovers. It is I, ZM Wise, and here I am with another home recording just for you. A little while back, I uploaded a video of the unboxing of the Penguin Little Black Classics box set. Today, however, after a very suspenseful 3 weeks, this arrived from the UK. Can you guess what it is? Can you? Want me to tell you? Okay. It's the sequel to the Penguin Little Black Classics box set. Most of these authors are from the 20th century, and unlike the last box set, there are 50 books instead of 80. And it includes a very lovely selection of very avant-garde essays, new poetry, radical polemics. I'm going off of course, the description online. And I'm extremely elated that it finally arrived. So, let's cut it open, shall we? It's not really necessary for you to see this part anyway, so excuse me. Who says you needed a knife, huh? Ooh, very nice. And from out of the cardboard womb, the bubble wrap placenta. Wow, I'll be darned. It's a smaller box and a bookmark. Very nice. I think I'll open this end. Swear to goodness, I feel like Charlie Bucket opening a bloody Wonka bar. One more. Slice. And now, for the, oh, beautiful, beautiful, it's in lovely shrink wrap. Da 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 da. Penguin Modern. Very nice selection. Allen Ginsberg, Jack Kerouac, Audre Lorde, Saul Bellow, Andy Warhol. Very excited. Very excited. So, we just cut open the shrink wrap, and we will be on our merry way. Oops. Made a slight mark on the box with my key. Okay, maybe I did need a knife. My apologies. So like before, I'll be going through each and every one of the books. I'll read the description on the back, so you can see. Very nice selection. Very, very nice. So, let's start with... Alright. Very, very important document. Martin Luther King Jr. Letter from Birmingham Jail. This landmark missive from one of the greatest activists in history calls for direct, non-violent resistance in the fight against racism and reflects on the healing power of love. Extremely important document. It's been a little while since I've read it, a few years. It came in this anthology of essays from many different people throughout history. Even some of the early philosophers had essays. My favorite beat poet, one of my favorite poets of all time, Allen Ginsberg. Television was a baby crawling toward that death chamber. Profane and prophetic verses about sex, death, revolution, and America by the great icon of beat poetry. And of course, as he said, beatnik is a newspaper stereotype, so It's quite true. Daphne Du Maurier, The Breakthrough. A scientist's attempt to solve the mystery of life after death has chilling consequences in this eerie tale from a virtuoso writer of suspense. Do you like my suspense fiction? Ah, Dorothy Parker, The Custard Heart. Wisecracking and heartbreaking, these tales of women on the edge by the legendary wit Dorothy Parker show the darkness beneath the surface of the Jazz Age. I need to pronounce this correctly. Oh, okay. Let me see here. Right. Okay. AKUTAGAWA and Others. 3 Japanese short stories. These beguiling, strange, funny, and hair-raising tales of imprisonment, memory, and atrocity from early 20th century Japan. My apologies for taking so long on the pronunciation. I would prefer to say it correctly. So, that's just me. ANAIS nin, The Veiled Woman. Transgressive desires and sexual encounters are recounted in these 4 pieces from one of the greatest writers of erotic fiction. Oh yes, yes indeed. Nin is definitely one of those people. As well as one of my friends. One of my very dear friends is an erotic writer. Her field is erotic romance, though. Sometimes the font is kind of, it's very weird. George Orwell. Definitely one of my favorite authors. Notes on Nationalism. Biting and timeless reflections on patriotism, prejudice, and power from the man who wrote about his nation better than anyone. That he did. That he did. Gertrude Stein. Food. From apples to artichokes, these glittering, fragmented, painterly portraits of food by the avant-garde pioneer Gertrude Stein are redolent of sex, laughter, and the joy of everyday life. Very nice. Just for the hell of it, I'll read you an example. Sauce. What is belated? What is all B section? What is no much? Sauce Sam in. Stanislaw. Sorry, my goodness sakes, this font is insane. Stanislaw Lem. The 3 Electroknights. From a giant of 20th century science fiction, these 4 miniature space epics feature crazy inventors, surreal worlds, robot kings, and madcap machines. Patrick Kavanagh, The Great Hunger. By turns tragic and comic, irascible and exalted, these are some of the best loved poems by a writer who transformed Irish verse. An amazing contemporary, or slightly contemporary Irish poet. Danilo, The Legend of the Sleepers. Sleepers awake in a remote cave, and the ancient mystic Simon Magus attempts a miracle in these 2 magical otherworldly tales from one of the greatest voices of 20th century Europe. Ralph Ellison, The Black Ball. Stories of belonging and alienation, violence and beauty, racial injustice and unexpected kindness from a writer of soaring emotion and lyricism. Here's a question for all of you, just for the hell of it. Have you ever attempted to write a lyrical essay? Or some call it a lyric essay? I have yet to. I'm definitely going to attempt that feat pretty soon. It's a wonderful exercise too, because almost half of it is practically poetry. Jean Rhys, The September Petronella. 4 searing stories of women lost adrift, down but not quite out, that span the course of a lifetime, from a Caribbean childhood to a ruinous adulthood to old age and beyond. Ah, yes! Franz Kafka, Investigations of a Dog. How does a dog see the world? How do any of us? In this playful and enigmatic story of a canine philosopher, Kafka explores the limits of knowledge. Or perhaps it's Kafka. CLARICE Lispector, Daydream and Drunkenness of a Young Lady. 3 intoxicating tales of 3 women, their secret desires, fears, and madness from a giant of Brazilian literature. Okay, well, I probably won't pronounce this correctly, but I'm going to try. RHYSZARD Kapuscinski. An advertisement for toothpaste. The great traveler reporter finds an even stranger and more exotic society in his own home of post-war Poland than in any of the distant lands he has visited. Oh, yes. I could tell it was a Polish name, though, especially with certain symbols behind it. Albert Camus, Create Dangerously. Ooh, yes. Camus argues passionately that the artist has a responsibility to challenge, provoke, and speak up for those who cannot, in this powerful speech, accompanied here by 2 others. Very important. Oh, yes! John Steinbeck. Classic. Timeless. The Vigilante. In these searing stories set in California's Salinas Valley, one of America's greatest, most humane writers explores mob violence, a disturbing encounter, and a bitter betrayal. Oh my. Fernando Pessoa, I Have More Souls Than One. Written in the voices of 4 different alter egos, these rich, strange, and mesmeric verses by Portugal's greatest poet express a maelstrom of conflicted thoughts and feelings. I do love my poetry, especially international poetry. Ooh, Shirley Jackson, The Missing Girl. Malice, deception, and creeping dread lie beneath the surface of ordinary American life in these miniature masterworks. Oh, yes, indeed. Gazdanov and Others, 4 Russian short stories. In these stories, 4 writers, all exiles from revolutionary Russia, explore 4 deaths in a world which old certainties have crumbled. Italio Calvino, The Distance of the Moon. These exuberant, endlessly inventive stories interweave scientific fact with wordplay, whimsy, and cosmic flights of fancy in a strange and wondrous universe. Oh, definitely one of my favorite contemporary poets, Audre Lorde. The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. From the self-described black, lesbian, mother, warrior, poet, these soaring, urgent essays on the power of women, poetry, and anger are filled with darkness and light. Definitely anticipating this read. Leonora Carrington, The Skeleton's Holiday. These dreamlike, carnivalesque fables by one of the leading lights of the surrealist movement are masterpieces of invention and grand, Guignol humor. Definitely one of the important writers of the Beat Generation, William S. Burroughs, The Finger. A deliberately severed finger, a junkie's Christmas miracle, and a Tangier con artist, among others, feature in these hallucinogenic sketches and stories from the infamous Beat legend. Yes, indeed. Start a new pile here. Ah, Samuel Beckett said the artist's job is to fail. Fail better. The end. From From the master of the absurd, these two stories of unnamed vagrants contending with decay and death combine bleakness with the blackest of humor. Funny, because not too long ago, I recently purchased the collected poems of Beckett. One of my greatest purchases, I think. Kathy Acker, New York City in 1979. A tale of art, sex, blood, junkies, and whores in New York's underground from cult literary icon Kathy Acker. Very nice. Chinua Achebe, Africa's Tarnished Name. Electrifying essays on the history, complexity, and appropriation of a continent from the father of modern African literature. I have heard of him. I haven't read a great deal of his work, unfortunately. It's a first time for everything. Susan Sontag, Notes on Camp. These two classic essays were the first works of criticism to break down the boundaries between high and low culture, and made Susan Sontag a literary sensation. Quite rightly. John Berger, The Red Tenda of Bologna. A dreamlike meditation on memory, food, paintings, a fond uncle, and the improbable beauty of Bologna from the visionary thinker and art critic. I do love art criticism as well as art history. Just in general, when it comes to a certain piece, whether visual, auditory, or written, I appreciate the making behind the piece. I really do. Francois Sagan, The Gigolo. A middle-aged woman breaks with her young lover, a husband is suspected of infidelity, a dying man reflects on his extramarital affairs in these shimmering, bittersweet tales of desire and disillusionment. Youch. Cyprien Equensi, Glittering City. Sorry if I pronounced it wrong. Untrustworthy, charming, fussy Joe spins tall tales and breaks hearts in this rollicking story set in the sensational city of 1960s Lagos. Jack Kerouac, Peers of the Homeless Night. Soaring, freewheeling snapshots of life on the road across America from the beat writer who inspired a generation. That he did. Let's see if they're poems or stories. Yep, stories. Sometimes they don't say. Hans Fallada. Why do you wear a cheap watch? Darkly funny, streetwise tales of lowlifes, grifters, and ordinary people trying to make ends meet in pre-war Germany. Truman Capote, The Duke in His Domain. This mesmerizing profile of an insecure, vulnerable young Marlon Brando brooding in a Kyoto hotel during a break from filming is a peerless piece of journalism. Saul Bellow, Leaving the Yellow House. A stubborn, hard-drinking elderly woman living in a desert town finds herself faced with an impossible choice in this caustically funny, precisely observed tale from an American prose master. Catherine Ann Porter, The Cracked Looking Glass. A passionate, unfulfilled woman considers her life and her marriage in this moving novella by one of America's finest short story writers. Sorry, Lewis Carroll. It's no more through anymore. Now it's cracked. James Baldwin, Dark Days. Drawing on Baldwin's own experiences of prejudice in an America violently divided by race, these searing essays blend the intensely personal with the political to envisage a better world. Georges Simenon, Letter to My Mother. Georges Simenon's dark, confessional letter to his dead mother explores the complexity of parent-child relationships and the bitterness of things unsaid. Sounds like an intense read already. Ah, William Carlos Williams. Yes! Death the Barber. Filled with bright, unforgettable images, the deceptively simple work of William Carlos Williams revolutionized American verse and made him one of the greatest 20th century poets, indeed. I have Patterson, actually, a copy of Patterson. Betty Friedan, The Problem That Has No Name. The pioneering Betty Friedan gave voice to countless American housewives who, despite being sold a dream of the perfect home and family, silently wondered, is this all? And set the women's movement in motion. Quite rightly. Yes! Ugh! Love this poet, Federico Garcia Lorca. The Dialogue of Two Snails. A dazzling selection of the beautiful, brutal, and darkly brilliant work of Spain's greatest 20th century poet, from his beloved gypsy ballads to pieces appearing in English for the first time. Score! New translation! How accurate is it? Yuko Tsushima. The Dogs and Walls. Two luminous, tender stories from one of Japan's greatest 20th century writers, showing how childhood memories, dreams, and fleeting encounters shape our lives. Javier Marias, Madame du Deffans, and the Idiots. 5 sparkling, irreverent, brief portraits of famous literary figures, including libertines, eccentrics, and rogues, from Spain's greatest living writer. Carson McCullers, The Haunted Boy. From master of Southern Gothic, these moving stories portray love, sorrow, and our search for happiness and understanding. Another one of my favorite poets, Jorge Luis Borges, The Garden of Forking Paths. Fantastical tales of mazes, puzzles, lost labyrinths, and bookish mysteries from a unique imagination of a literary magician. That's a pretty amazing title. I aspire to be so. Andy Warhol, fame. The legendary pop artist Andy Warhol's hilarious, gossipy vignettes and aphorisms on the topics of love, fame, and beauty. Primo Levi, The Survivor. From the writer who bore witness to the 20th century's darkest days, these verses of beauty and horror include the poem that inspired the title of his memoir, If This Is a Man. Vladimir? Really? For God's sakes, ZMYs, what kind of English major are you, for goodness sakes? It was a humid day. I blame the humidity. Apologies, Vladimir Nabokov, Lance. These 3 dazzling stories of obsession, mania, and an extraterrestrial nightmare feature all the wit, dexterity, and inventiveness that are the hallmarks of Nabokov's genius. And last but not least, number 50, Wendell Berry, Why I Am Not Going to Buy a Computer. The great American poet, novelist, and farmer argues for a life lived slowly and the value of home. Well, thank you very much, Poetry and Arts Lovers. This has been ZMYs, and this has been a pleasure. Get your copy today. Penguin Modern Classics box sets. I got mine on abooks.com at a pretty decent price. It's also available on Amazon. And you can, of course, buy it directly from Penguin. It's just one of my favorite classic book publishers. Truly. And it would be an honor to work for them, in my opinion. And what an honor it must be, in general, just to be able to edit, re-edit, add, subtract new work of some of the greatest classic writers known to humanity. Goodness. Anyway, I digress. Poetry lives. Long live the arts. Don't forget to like and subscribe.